The first thing I noticed was how quiet it got when Sean stopped talking. We were halfway through a 12-hour night shift, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, machines humming like they always did, but the silence between us felt louder than any alarm. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't neutral. It was the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing, the kind that presses against your chest and dares you to do something stupid. We'd been working nights together for almost 6 months. Same schedule, same department, same break room that smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. At first, we talked constantly about dumb customers, bad managers, whatever show we were both binging. Sean had this dry, effortless way of talking that pulled people in without trying. I noticed it right away. Tried not to. I'm Logan. I notice things. I always have. Sean was the opposite. He moved through the world like nothing really stuck to him. Tall, broad-shouldered, always rolling his sleeves up like he didn't even feel the cold. He laughed loud, leaned too close when he talked, and never seemed aware of the effect he had on people. Or maybe he was very aware and just didn't care. That night, though, something shifted. We were restocking supplies in the back, just the two of us, concrete walls, harsh white light, the kind of place where sound doesn't echo so much as die. I made a joke about how night shift slowly turns you feral. Normally, Sean would have smirked, fired something back. Instead, he just looked at me. Not blank, not annoyed, just still. Then he turned away and kept working. I told myself not to read into it. That's my bad habit. Overthinking, creating tension where there isn't any. But the air felt different after that. Thicker, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. We didn't talk for almost an hour. An hour doesn't sound like much, but on nights like that, it stretches. Every shared glance feels intentional. Every accidental brush of hands feels like it lingers too long. When Sean finally spoke again, his voice was lower than usual. You ever feel like nights mess with your head? I laughed a little too quickly. That's basically the job description. He nodded, jaw tight, eyes fixed straight ahead. Yeah. Still. Another pause. Longer this time. I wanted to ask what was really going on. I wanted to break whatever invisible line had been drawn between us. Instead, I stayed quiet. And somehow, that felt worse. The dangerous thing about silence isn't what it hides. It's what it invites. By the time our break rolled around at 2:17 a.m. same cursed minute every night, we were sitting across from each other at the break room table, untouched coffee between us, the vending machine humming like it was listening in. Sean leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes on me now. Really on me. Logan, he said, slow, like he was testing the word. Can I ask you something? Every instinct in my body told me this was a bad idea. Sure, I said anyway. He hesitated, just long enough for my heart to start racing. And that's when I knew whatever he was about to say, whatever this silence had been building toward, there was no going back after this. Sean didn't ask right away. He rubbed his face with one hand, like he was trying to wake himself up, then leaned forward, elbows on the table. The hum of the vending machine filled the space between us. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Normal sounds. None of them helped. You ever get the feeling, he said slowly, that you're standing too close to someone, but if you step back, something breaks? My stomach dropped. I tried to keep my tone light. That's weirdly specific. He huffed out a quiet laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, sorry. Ignore me. Night shift brain. But he didn't look away. And that was the problem. I'd spent months convincing myself whatever I felt around Sean was one-sided. A crush I could manage. A situation I could keep professional. I'd built rules in my head: don't linger, don't stare, don't imagine what his hand would feel like if it stayed on your arm instead of moving away. Rules only work when the other person isn't pushing back. Sean, I said carefully, you okay? He nodded too fast, then shook his head, then laughed again, softer this time. You ever notice how you're the only person I don't feel like bullshitting at 3 in the morning? That did it. That cracked something open. I notice a lot of things, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes flicked to my mouth. Just for a second. But I saw it. The silence came back, heavier than before. Dangerous in a different way now. Less unknown. More loaded. He stood up abruptly. Come on. We should get back before they start timing us. We walked side by side down the corridor, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Almost was worse than nothing. Every step felt measured. Controlled. Like we were both trying not to cross an invisible line we'd already smudged beyond repair. Back in the storage area, the lights felt harsher. Sean grabbed a box from the shelf harder than necessary. Did I make things weird? He asked without looking at me. I swallowed. Define weird. He exhaled sharply. I don't usually dash. He stopped, jaw clenched. Never mind. No, I said. You don't get to drop that and walk away. That finally got him to turn around. Up close, I could see the tiredness in his face. The tension. The way his guard wasn't all the way up anymore. That scared me more than confidence ever could. I don't usually think about coworkers like this, he said quietly. The words landed between us and just sat there. Like this. I didn't ask him to clarify. I didn't need to. Sean, I said, voice low. Are you sure you want to open that door at work? On nights? With me? His mouth twitched. You saying you don't? I should have lied. Instead, I said, I think about it every time you stand too close and don't move. The air shifted instantly. Charged. Electric. Sean stepped closer, then stopped himself, fists clenched at his sides. Damn, he muttered. That's not helping. Yeah, I said. Tell me about it. We stood there, inches apart, neither of us touching, both of us very aware of how badly we wanted to. This wasn't a drunken mistake or a joke taken too far. This was deliberate, slow, real. From the other side of the room, a radio crackled. Someone laughing. Life going on like we weren't standing at the edge of something irreversible. Sean leaned in just enough that I could feel his breath on my cheek. We should stop. I nodded. Probably. Neither of us moved. The silence wrapped around us again, but now it wasn't empty. It was waiting. Sean was the one who stepped back first. Not far. Just enough to break the bubble. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a shaky breath, like he'd been holding it for way too long. This is a terrible idea, he said. I nodded again. My heart was still pounding, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. Yeah. A beat passed. Then he added, quieter, but I don't want it to stop. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble. We went back to work after that, but calling it work felt generous. Everything we did was threaded with awareness. Every time he passed behind me, every time I handed him something and our fingers brushed, it felt intentional even when it probably wasn't. We didn't touch. Not really. But we stopped pretending we didn't want to. The rest of the shift dragged. The clock over the doorway seemed stuck, red numbers blinking like they were mocking us. 3:41, 4:06. For 52. Every minute felt heavier than the last. At one point, Sean leaned in and murmured, "You're doing that thing." I frowned. What thing? The thing where you go quiet when you're thinking too hard. I glanced at him. You noticed that? He smiled faintly. I notice a lot of things too, apparently. That smile stayed with me longer than it should have. By the time 6 a.m. rolled around, the sky outside the loading dock windows was just starting to lighten. That washed-out blue that feels unreal after a night indoors. End of shift. Escape time. We clocked out in silence, standing a little too close again. When Sean grabbed his jacket, his arm brushed mine. This time neither of us moved away. Hey, he said as we headed toward the exit. You got a minute? I hesitated. Every sensible part of my brain screamed don't. Every other part of me was already saying yes. Yeah, I said. We stepped outside into the cold morning air. The parking lot was nearly empty, the world quiet in a way that felt completely different from the silence inside. This one wasn't watching us. It didn't care. Sean stopped near his truck, hands shoved into his pockets. I don't really know what I'm doing, he admitted. I just know I don't like pretending this isn't happening. I leaned against my car, exhausted, wired, painfully aware of how close he was. Same. He looked at me, then really looked. Not guarded. Not joking. Just honest. I don't want this to be some secret that eats at us, he said. And I don't want to screw things up at work. So what do you want? I asked. Another pause. Shorter this time. I want to see you, he said. Outside of this place. In the daylight. Somewhere we can actually talk. My chest tightened. Like a coffee? His mouth curved into something warmer. Yeah, like a coffee. For the first time all night. The tension eased, not gone, just redirected. Contained. Okay, I said. Coffee. Sean nodded, like he'd just made a decision he'd been circling for weeks. Good. We stood there for a moment longer, neither of us ready to leave yet. Then he opened his door, glanced back at me, and said, "Get some sleep. Logan." "You too," I replied. As he drove off, I realized something that sent a shiver through me, despite the exhaustion. The silence between us wasn't dangerous anymore. It was just the beginning. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the room still dark, replaying everything: his voice, the way he'd said my name, the way the silence between us had finally shifted into something honest. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him leaning in, stopping himself, choosing restraint instead of impulse. That somehow made it worse. By the time my alarm went off that evening, I felt wrung out. Shower, coffee, autopilot. I told myself I was being dramatic. It was just coffee. Two coworkers decompressing after a weird night. People did that all the time. Except my chest tightened the second I walked into the building and saw Sean already there, leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone. He looked up immediately. There it was again, that look. Not subtle, not hidden, just recognition. "Hey," he said, like it meant more than the word usually did. "Hey." We didn't talk about the night before. Not directly. We slipped back into our rhythm too easily, like muscle memory. Jokes, side comments, shared looks that lasted a beat longer than necessary. But underneath it all, something hummed. Anticipation, nerves, want. At break, he slid his phone across the table toward me. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Cornerstone Coffee. No emojis, no fluff, just intent. I typed my number into his phone before I could overthink it. Our fingers brushed again. This time neither of us apologized. "See you tomorrow," he said. I nodded. Yeah. The next morning, daylight felt wrong. Too exposed. Too real. I almost bailed twice, once while putting on my jacket, once while sitting in my car outside the Symphony. Sean was already there when I walked in. Of course he was. He ditched the work boots for sneakers, hoodie instead of a uniform. Still Sean. Just softer around the edges. More approachable. More dangerous. "Logan," he said, standing up a little too fast. I smiled despite myself. "You look like you didn't sleep either." He laughed under his breath. "Guilty." We ordered, sat by the window. Sunlight spilled across the table, exposing everything we'd been hiding under fluorescent lights and night shift fatigue. Conversation came easy at first: background stuff. Music. Bad sleep schedules. How weird it feels when the world is awake while you're winding down. Then Sean leaned back, eyes on me, expression serious. "I should probably say this out loud," he said. "I'm not confused about you." My pulse spiked. "Okay. I'm confused about timing. About work. About what this turns into." He paused. "But not about wanting this." Something in my chest loosened. Good. Because I'm not either. That was all it took. He reached across the table, slow, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers closed around mine, warm, solid, real. No rush. No hiding. Just us. In the daylight. Choosing it. Outside, cars passed. People laughed. Life went on. Inside that CF pocket, the silence between us wasn't dangerous at all anymore. It was full. We didn't kiss that morning. Not because we didn't want a God. We did, but because something about the way his hand stayed wrapped around mine felt more intimate than rushing it. Like we were proving to ourselves that this wasn't just night shift tension bleeding into daylight. Sean walked me to my car anyway. The parking lot was bright, ordinary, painfully normal. He leaned against the door of my car, hands in his hoodie pocket, rocking slightly on his heels like he wasn't used to standing still when something mattered. "So," he said, "this is the part where we pretend this was casual?" I smiled. "You bad at pretending?" "Terrible," he admitted. "Always have been." That earned him a soft laugh from me, but the moment stretched again. That familiar silence, but now it felt like shared ground instead of a cliff edge. "I'm glad we did this," I said. "Me too." He hesitated, then added, "I don't want to disappear back into work mode tonight." "If that makes sense." "It does," I said. "We don't have to rush anything. Just don't shut me out." His jaw tightened slightly, like that hit something real. "I won't." This time, when he leaned in, it wasn't rushed or impulsive. Just a brief press of his forehead against mine. Warm. Grounding. A promise without words. "Get home safe," he murmured. "You too." That night at work felt different in a quieter way. No charged stares. No unresolved tension vibrating under our skin. We worked smoothly, efficiently, like two people who trusted each other. Occasionally our eyes met, and there'd be a small smile. A reminder. During break, Sean nudged my foot under the table. "Still good?" he asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "Still good." Weeks passed like that. Coffee after shifts. Texts that started mundane and drifted into something warmer. Inside jokes. Shared playlists. That kind of slow intimacy that sneaks up on you when you're not watching for it. We never crossed lines at work. That was our unspoken rule. But outside of it, we were building something carefully, deliberately. One night, toward the end of another long shift, Sean walked beside me to the exit and said, "You know what scares me?" I glanced at him. "What?" "That this feels easy." He smiled, but there was honesty behind it. "And I've spent most of my life thinking things that matter aren't supposed to be." I stopped walking. "Maybe that's the lie," I said. "Maybe it's only dangerous when you pretend it's not happening." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe." Outside, the sky was just starting to lighten again. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet between us felt like home. The first time we crossed from almost to actually, it wasn't dramatic. No big confession. No sweeping moment. It was a Tuesday, another night shift, another stretch of hours that blurred together. We were finishing up early, the building quieter than usual, lights dimmed in sections that were already closed down for the night. Sean was helping me close out a task, standing closer than strictly necessary, his shoulder brushing mine every time he leaned in. I felt it again, that hum. Familiar. Steady. No panic this time. "You coming to my place after?" he asked casually, eyes still on what he was doing. My heart skipped anyway. "Yeah. Yeah," he said. "If you want." I did. His apartment was small, clean in that lived-in way. Nothing fancy. Couch, coffee table, muted lamps instead of overhead lights. It felt him. Comfortable. Grounded. We kicked off our shoes, both suddenly unsure what to do with our hands. Sean broke the tension by laughing quietly. "We're really good at overthinking, huh?" "Elite level," I said. He stepped closer, slowly, giving me time. Always giving me time. "Logan," he said, softer now, "I don't want to rush you." I just dash. I reached out, my fingers lightly catching the hem of his hoodie. "I'm not being rushed." That was all the permission either of us needed. The kiss was gentle at first, careful, like we were still making sure the ground wouldn't give way beneath us. His lips were warm, his hand steady at my waist, thumb pressing in just enough to let me know he was there. When he pulled back, forehead resting against mine, he exhaled. "Yeah, okay." I smiled. "Okay." We didn't go any further that night. We talked instead, about things we hadn't said yet, about past relationships that didn't fit, about fear, about how silence can protect you or trap you depending on how long you live inside it. At some point, Sean squeezed my hand and said, "I'm really glad it's you." I believed him. After that, things unfolded naturally. More nights at his place, some at mine, kisses that lingered longer, touches that grew more confident. Still no rushing, still no hiding. We were learning each other in pieces, habits, moods, quiet tells. At work, we stayed professional. But sometimes, when no one was looking, he'd brush past me and murmur, "You good?" And I always was. The dangerous silence that once sat between us was gone now, replaced with something steady, something earned. One night, weeks later, as we walked out together under a sky just beginning to lighten, Sean reached for my hand without hesitation. And I realized something then, something simple and terrifying in the best way. We weren't waiting anymore. We were already there. It's funny how you don't notice stability right away. You expect it to feel loud, obvious, like a milestone you can point to and say, "This is it." But with Sean, it crept in quietly. In the way he learned how I take my coffee without asking. In the way I started leaving a spare hoodie at his place and didn't think twice about it. In the way silence stopped being something we navigated and became something we shared. We still worked nights together. That never changed. What changed was how grounded I felt walking into those shifts. The building didn't feel like a pressure cooker anymore. It felt manageable. Like whatever the night threw at us, we'd already survived worse just by not saying what needed to be said. One shift, a few months in, we were restocking again, same room where everything had almost tipped over that first night. I caught myself smiling at the memory. "What?" Sean asked, glancing over. "Nothing," I said, then reconsidered. "Okay, something. Remember when this room felt like it was about to implode?" He laughed softly. "I thought I was losing my mind." "Same," I said. "Turns out we were just avoiding the obvious." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even though no one was around. "You still think silence is dangerous?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The ease in his posture. The way he wasn't bracing for anything anymore. "No," I said. "I think unspoken things are." He nodded like that settled something for him. like it matched what he'd been feeling too. Later that night, as we walked out together, he reached for my hand without checking who was watching. There was no one around, but that wasn't the point. You know, he said, I used to think night shifts were just something to survive. And now? I asked. And now, he said, squeezing my hand. They're where everything started. The sky was just beginning to lighten again. That same washed-out blue. Same end-of-shift quiet. Only this time, it didn't feel like an ending at all. It felt like proof. Proof that silence doesn't have to be dangerous, as long as you don't hide in it. The night everything finally settled, nothing special happened. No crisis. No big emotional speech. Just another shift winding down. Another quiet morning creeping in through the windows like it always did. We finished up early and found ourselves sitting in the break room, coffee cups between us, the building half asleep. Sean leaned back in his chair, stretching, then glanced at me with that familiar look, the one that said he was thinking without overthinking. You know what's wild? He said. What? If you'd talked that first night, I probably would have shut down. I smiled faintly. And if we'd stayed silent much longer, we would have imploded. He nodded. Yeah, that thin line. We didn't need to say more than that. When we walked out together, the air was cold and clean, the sky pale with early morning light. Sean stopped beside my car, not in a hurry, not dragging it out either. Just present. I'm glad we didn't rush, he said. But I'm also glad we didn't hide. I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together easily, naturally. Me too. He leaned in and kissed me soft, unguarded, like something that didn't need to prove itself anymore. When we pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine for a moment, breathing me in. We're good, right? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. We really are. He smiled then, wide and real, the kind that comes from feeling steady instead of unsure. As he drove off and I got into my car, I thought back to that first night, the charged silence, the almosts, the fear of saying the wrong thing. Turns out, the silence wasn't dangerous because it existed. It was dangerous because we almost let it stay empty. Now, it wasn't empty at all. It was full of everything we'd finally chosen to say and everything we didn't need words for anymore.